Thank you for tuning in to the Onda Show with your host, Dee Blaze, here on this great radio station. The Onda Show is a variety show specializing in the entertainment world in music, movies, television, sports, and other specialties. Today's segment will be on location, so you might experience some acoustic anomalies which were not fixable in production. We apologize in advance. For the next hour, Dee will bring you some interesting interviews to entertain and educate. So if you're listening to this program at home or at the office, your smartphone, or your car, let's begin with Dee Blaze on The Onda Show.
Hi, I'm Dee Garcia Blaze with The Onda Show, a brand new show that shines a spotlight on Chicanos and Latinos and anybody who's willing to work with our community. And with me today is a special guest, Marco E. Lopez. Marco E. Lopez was born in Arizona, started school in Texas, and raised in Bakersfield, California. He received a BA from San Jose State College, a JD from Bolt Hall Law School, Berkeley Law, studied public international law at the Hague World Court Academy. Upon receiving his law degree, worked for one of the first ALRB members, Leroy Chatfield, and upon leaving state employment became a volunteer attorney for the UFW in Delano, and soon thereafter was made House Counsel and then General Counsel by Cesar Chavez himself. After leaving the UFW, he set up his own practice doing primarily civil litigation and civil rights law. High-profile cases include Navarro versus Los Angeles County, where after 2 appeals to the 9th District Court of Appeals, new case law was made requiring police agencies to prioritize 9/11 domestic violence calls. Also, the case of Carrillo versus the United States of America, in which he represented a 12-year-old Mexican boy who was shot by a U.S. Border Patrolman while standing on Mexican soil. That case was the first of its type where the U.S. was found liable for excessive use of force. During the last year, has co-edited a progressive bilingual community newspaper in conservative North San Diego County via AlianzaNorthCounty.com. Welcome to the show, Marco.
Thank you very much, Dee. It's a pleasure to be here and an honor. Thanks.
It's an honor to meet you, and I'm glad that you've given us the opportunity to ask you some questions about your experiences as head counsel with Cesar Chavez.
Absolutely.
What was your favorite moment?
Wow, in working with Cesar?
Right.
Wow, there was a number of them, but I met Cesar when I was in high school, and from then on, pretty much, I wanted to go to law school because I wanted to come back and work with the union's legal department. There were a number of, it was very challenging working with Cesar. It was tough. He rode you to the ground, but it was also, I want to say fun, but that's actually a little bit frivolous. It was just a great experience, Dee. When you've got a group of people who are like-minded and working in a movement to help people, it's just, there's nothing that compares to it. And of course, we were all volunteers, but still, I've never been poorer, and yet I can truly say I've never been happier than those years that I spent with the United Farm Workers Union. It was just great all around. There were a lot of victories and there were a lot of defeats, but the one thing that I recall so well about Cesar is that he was such a fighter. He always landed on his feet. He always found humor even in defeats that we had at times. And so he just carried us all. Yeah.
Do you have aren't you writing a book about Cesar Chavez?
I am absolutely. My book is entitled My Walk with Cesar. And hopefully before the end of the year I'll have it finished. And it starts out, the chronology of when I met him. By the time I met Cesar in 1968, I was a senior, and he had already been on the cover of Time magazine twice.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so I went to a Catholic school in Bakersfield, which was only 30 miles from Delano. And it was a rather conservative school, I might say, you know, and there were a lot of the growers' kids that were part of the student body, you know, but there was one particular Christian brother that joined, actually. He left the Christian Brother Order to go work full time, and that was Leroy Chatfield, who eventually I ended up working with on the Agricultural Labor Relations Board. But you could really feel it. You know, I come from a middle class family. My mother owned a business, and it was spices, Mexican foods, tortilleria, you know. So the way I got exposed to the farm workers' plight was actually by going hanging out with my cousin and going delivering to some of the labor camps. And some of the labor camps were just horrible. I mean, they were deplorable, you know, unhealthy. The food was bad. In all fairness, some of the growers had, and the larger companies especially, you know, they had nice, you know, stainless steel kitchens and good food and such, but some of them were just really bad.
What was taking yourself back to that moment with regard to the images that were seared into your mind? What did you see that was deplorable as you take us back to memory lane? I mean, what were the deplorable conditions that you saw that you can?
Okay, excellent question. I saw everything from farm workers sleeping under trees, you know, and their bedding was essentially cardboard or rags. In one particular camp that I went to, they were cooking, actually the chicken stunk. They were making a caldo de sopa, caldo de pollo, you know, and that kind of thing, and just flies all over and stuff, you know. And I was always raised to be proud of being Mexicano, and I always have been, you know. And so when I see Mexicanos mistreated, or actually any human being, but particularly in this case, they were all Mexicanos, you know.
Your people.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's when I started getting this anger. It was an anger that I basically routed in a constructive manner, I hope. And so I ended up coming back to the union, like I say, as an attorney. 10 years later, I was general counsel after I had met Caesar. But he was the leader to follow. You know, I don't care from what angle. A lot of people judge Caesar, you know, and the other board members because of some failures of the union administratively and such, you know. And that's a bunch of bull, you know, because they failed to see that the impact of the union, the impact of Caesar was across the board. I mean, you know, thanks to Caesar, education, you know, improved. People had more opportunities, you know, there was more legislators. There was just a tremendous impact. And as I saw it, you know, it was my having observed discrimination, not only in California, but also in El Paso, you know, that to me said, you know what, he's the guy to follow, and I did.
I was born in Texas, actually. Is that where you went to school, was in El Paso?
I started school in El Paso, yeah, and then at a young age of 8, we came to Bakersfield, so I was primarily raised, although I was born in Arizona, I was born in Douglas, Arizona, at the border. So in a way, I've been sort of a border person, you know. I was born in Douglas.
El Paso, and then
eventually did civil rights cases here in San Diego, also at the border, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
The case that I want to visit with you is with regard to the 12-year-old Mexican boy who was shot by border patrolmen, and it seemed like it seemed like you essentially won that case. Can you tell us a little bit about that 12-year-old and what's going on with this family today?
Well, what happened essentially, I had left the union because of, you know, my family. They needed me in Los Angeles, so it was unfortunate, but, you know, Caesar understood. And so I went to LA, and then when I was practicing, I had my own practice, and when I was in LA, and I read in the LA Times a little section about a 12-year-old boy that was shot across the border by a U.S. Border Patrolman. and the blood boiled. I just couldn't, comprehend how that would happen. And so less than a week later, the mother signed me up to be the attorney. And basically what had happened is that Humberto's older brother, Humberto was a frail 12-year-old boy. I mean, he weighed no more than 90-some pounds, and they basically did what a lot of kids do, Mexicanos at the border. They either sell chicles or they help tourists carry their bags, for change and stuff. And that's what they'd been doing in the morning. But Eduardo, who was 2 years older, he was 14 at the time, as he often did, and other kids did, is he crossed the border fence illegally to go to the Jack in the Box, bought his hamburger, and then with all intentions of going back. He wasn't crossing to stay here permanently. But anyway, he was spotted, and it must have been a very slow day for the Border Patrol, because before you knew it, he was running back to Mexico, and you had 2 vans of Border Patrolmen, a helicopter that was circling and trying to knock him down to the ground as he was running down this rocky hill. And Humberto with some friends were playing soccer right near the border fence. They didn't know what was going on, but they saw something, and they saw the helicopter. So they run towards the border, and at that point, Eduardo had been grabbed by one of the border patrolmen, a guy named Lonergan, and he was beating him up, grabbing him and just beating him up with his baton, beating him up over and over. And that's when the kids started yelling, hey, llévenselo, pero no le peguen, And in desperation, there's a cobblestone road that used to run, it was called Callejón Internacional, and it ran, right by the fence. The international fence then wasn't what we have now, now you've got these impenetrable panels, of metal, but back then it was just a 10-foot wire mesh fence, basically. And so Humberto, in desperation, went to the cobblestone road and tried to pry a rock loose. And that's when Agent Ned Cole shot at him 3 times and hit him. It went through the back. The doctor later said that it missed the heart by an inch. And that was an international incident. Ironically, it was also the United Nations Year of the Child. And so we represented him, and this was a very interesting case for many reasons. My friend who was in Germany at the time heard of Humberto. It became a David and Goliath story, basically. We were fighting the U.S. government. We filed in Southern District here in San Diego, Southern District Federal Court. And we were before Judge Judith Keat, who's passed away now. But what happened, Didi, basically is that during the progress of the case, the government had a theory, and the theory was that Humberto, at the time he was shot, was right next to a 42 by 53 inch hole in the fence, and so that he had a rock, softball size, about to hit Agent Lonergan on the head, which of course would have justified the shooting, given as a rock can, be a deadly force. And so that was the theory they maintained throughout, And so on Good Friday, about 3 months before the trial, I get a call, and it was an anonymous call. My sister, who was my secretary, told me that, they wanted to talk to me, and I said, who called? She said, well, he wouldn't say. I said, what did he call about? She said, he didn't say. He just said it was important for you to be here at 1 o'clock, which I obviously stuck around. So he was obviously a federal agent. I didn't ask him for his name. I didn't see a need for it. But essentially, he confirmed. He says, you are representing Humberto Carrillo, are you not? And I said, yes. And so he says, well, take out a pen. I've got information for you. And he told me, have you ever received a statement given by Ned Cole? He was the shooter. Within a month after the shooting, I said, no. He said, I didn't think so.
You've been listening to the Que Onda show, and we will take a quick break and come back with Marco Lopez, counsel for Cesar Chavez.
promoting cultural awareness, togetherness, and education through the arts. We're CRN.
And we're back. Thank you for listening to the Que Onda show, and we will continue our interview with Marco.
I called the U.S. attorney, and we'd gotten along rather civilly, but I called Michael Quinton and I said, Michael, we've got a problem. He says, what is that? He says, well, what about this statement Ned Cole gave within a month after the shooting? And under his breath, he said, oh, shit.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I knew that he actually had known about this other statement, but that he had not produced it. So, to make a long story short, I go back and I file a motion with Judge Judith Keep. She grants, and compels the government, forces them to give us this statement, which was totally contradictory to the official. There was no hole in the fence, as he had said during his deposition in Buffalo, and so that was it. That was the end of it. It was so bad for the government, they didn't even put on Ned Cole. By that time, he had been transferred to New York, where he committed another injustice against a Canadian citizen. And so he was a real...
bad border patrol.
Yeah, and he'd been in war, he'd been in Vietnam, and he was apparently a guard of the largest concentration of bombs in the world at the time.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and so he was extremely tense.
Yeah.
But...
especially if you're, I don't know, when I served in the military, my first base was the Strategic Air Command, and it was a facility that held our nuclear weapons. So those Strategic Air Command bases, the security is elevated, everything is just more intense.
I bet.
So
I've seen that picture of you and your German Shepherd.
Yeah, I was a bomb dog handler, but they'd make us do like a perimeter, a scout, just to make sure everything was normal and nobody was trying to intrude, I guess. But that doesn't mean, and it doesn't give that border patrolman the right to carry out injustices on fellow man.
Absolutely, and he snapped. It was pretty obvious to us that he snapped. I handled a lot of cases, not only against Border Patrol, but I did a lot of excessive use of force cases, and I never made any general indictment against any law enforcement agency, because
some need to be held accountable.
Some do, absolutely, and now, it's gotten so much worse. Back then I was naive enough to think, that with these cases, bringing these cases against the government, one would hope things would get better. They would, come down on supervision and better training, but that's not what we're seeing. We're seeing the militarization of law enforcement throughout the country.
I think a lot of that has to do with how law enforcement agencies, when I served my time honorably, I considered joining the CIA or the FBI or the U.S. Marshals, and because a lot of law enforcement agencies, they want former military experience, so I don't know if that's a problem. Maybe they need to kind of dial it back a little bit.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, I'll give you an example of what happened in the Humberto Carrillo case. After the case was over, after they paid out the judgment, I got a call in my office. I was still in LA, and it was the FBI. They wanted to come and interview me. I said, absolutely. So they came, 2 agents. And
they wanted to interview you after the case?
After the case. And here goes, it shows you well, I guess it's an agency mentality, I suppose you can call it, but they came to interview me, Dee Dee, to find out who that caller was that gave me the tip. That's what they were interested in, and I said, you know what, let me tell you something. You have a case here where the government has lied to a federal judge, who has presented fraudulent evidence, and you're here to investigate the Good Samaritan who told the truth.
The whistleblower.
Exactly.
Right.
I dispatched him out of my office.
Good
I
for
said,
you.
Please leave my office,
Wow.
And that's the kind of stuff that still happens.
Yeah.
You know, whitewashing of cases such as this.
Mm-hmm.
And so anyway, so I did that for a while. I got burned out after a while in terms of the judges that they started then bringing. You know, Judith Keep was a very honorable, very fair judge, and unfortunately she's passed away. But after that, they started bringing in judges from other areas of the country that are so insensitive, like Little Rock, Arkansas, and they bring their staff. So it was like trying a case in Little Rock, Arkansas. So, you know, I got the message, and I had done, and I thought, you know what, let the younger lawyers do it now. I'm moving on to other things. But,
Yeah. Now you're writing a book.
well, that's one of the things I'm doing, but yeah, absolutely. That's the joy, because it's all about passing the torch, you know, and I love speaking to young people and telling them, you know, and that's part of it.
That's one of the reasons for this show is, you know, I've heard too many times where Chicanos will say, well, where are our Chicano heroes? You know, we have Martin Luther King, we have Cesar Chavez, but there's got to be more. And there are more. People such as yourself, artists, film directors, you know, every aspect in American culture is being covered by so many Chicanos that I want to preserve history and catalog it into one spot.
Yeah.
And be the go-to of Chicano heroes. I mean, before we came into this art gallery, I introduced you to one of the caretakers of the gallery, and you heard him say it was an honor to meet you because of your work with Cesar Chavez, especially in the legal department, and we want to preserve that.
Mm-hmm.
Do you?
I think it's important. I shy away from the term heroes, and I'm going to give you an example or a parallel as to why I do that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't consider myself a hero. I consider myself a veteran, you know.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But, for instance, Caesar was Catholic, and, you know, he did a lot. And I think according to Catholic doctrine, he would very easily qualify as a saint, because my understanding is you're either a martyr or you perform a miracle.
Mm-hmm.
And he was both,
Mm-hmm.
you know. But there's something about putting someone on a pedestal as a saint.
Mm-hmm.
It makes it distant. It makes it sort of like an unrealizable, you know, goal for someone.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and Caesar was far from a saint in many ways, and he'd be the first to tell you, right? So I'd rather have somebody like Caesar be approachable to the young. So my book is written, you know, in a way that obviously, I mean, I had so much respect for him, you know, throughout, and still do, and still defend him.
Mm-hmm.
You know, against those people, for instance, that would say that he was against undocumented people. Well, bullshit.
Yeah.
That's not true.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
I hear that a lot.
You do, and this is. I came into the union, Didi, at a very difficult point in time, and what had happened is some of the people in the leadership, including the legal department, Jerry Cohen, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
They started turning against the union, and they started turning specifically against Dolores and Caesar and the board. You know, it was sort of like what they call the tail wagging the organizational dog. You know, that's what they started doing or attempting to. And Jerry Cohen admits, you know, it was a philosophical debate of sorts, and it had to do with whether our people, our organizers, were going to be volunteers as opposed to paid. And Caesar was, you know, on the other side was Dolores, you know. But there were other issues, and when I went to a meeting in Salinas, Caesar asked me to go with the old legal department, as we know. They yelled obscenities at Caesar. These are attorneys who had kicked ass for the union in courts. They were great attorneys. I became an attorney in good part because of Jerry Cohen.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But here they were now attacking Caesar in the most vile and disrespectful way for over an hour in a meeting. You know, this was towards the end of it all. But then you start wondering, well, why didn't they do that to the growers or to even their attorneys, you know? And then I had to look at the fact that some of them were racist. And it reared its ugly head. And that's what Caesar had to go through.
Mm-hmm.
You know, even with his own staff, it was very difficult for him.
That happens in movements. They sometimes when things aren't going the way that others who have a superiority complex and they believe they're more superior and they don't like the way the movement's going, then they'll hijack it and create a mutiny and do a muddying of the waters, which I suspected. But overall, Cesar Chavez's work is to be commendable, and
exactly, and that's our legacy. Anyone who worked with Caesar, you know, was fortunate to know him, to march with him. But even in the Christian movement, it happened. James the Just, Jesus' brother.
Oh, right.
Right? With Paul.
Right.
I mean, they had horrible fights. But anyway, it's all over. You know, but in a way, it's all over. In another way, it isn't, because, as you say, those are people, the ones that lost. And Jerry Cohen is very open about it. He says, you know what, we fought a war and Caesar won and it's over. But for some people, it's not over, and they still malign Caesar, they still attack him, such as with that charge. Let me explain very briefly. What happened is, when there were strikes, okay, the growers, especially if it was a very successful strike, they would import people from Mexico that didn't have documentation. So, okay, what would happen? I'll tell you, because I was on the picket lines before I became an attorney, you know. What would happen was, we would try to convince the scabs, as we knew, strike breakers, not to break the strike, to go elsewhere, to join our ranks. We had in our ranks a lot of people that were undocumented people. We had no antipathy, quite the contrary, you know. And so it was only after they refused and they continued that, by strikers committee decision, including some undocumented, you know, they decided to call the Border Patrol. You know, that was the last measure.
Okay.
It had nothing to do with the fact that they were undocumented. It was just they were breaking the strike.
Got it.
And it's an industrial war we were involved in, so.
Got it.
Yeah.
Well, it's nice to hear that from the horse's mouth, and it quashes a lot of the rumors that can grow from something like that is being misinterpreted.
Yeah, and there's others, but that's one of the most important ones, because especially young people, they always want to know about that.
Well, where can a person get a hold of you in an effort with how can they look forward, or what's the title of your book, and how can a person?
Oh, okay, well, the title of the book, it's My Walk with Caesar.
Okay.
And hopefully it'll be out by the beginning of next year.
Okay.
And I do have excerpts. I go underground a little bit with Facebook, because I want to, you know, I have to focus on my writing sometimes, but you can look me up and I'll be back up.
Okay.
It's Marco E. Lopez Quesada, Quezada.
Okay.
Marco E. Lopez Quesada.
And do you by chance have a public email address that you can give out to my audience?
Sure. It's I'll give you Zubians. That's ZUBIANS @gmail.com. Zubians.com.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for appearing on the Que Onda show, and it's an honor to meet you, and thank you for taking the time for us so that we can pass on the stories to future Chicano generations.
Thank you, Didi.
Promoting cultural awareness, togetherness, and education through the arts. We're CRN.
This is Didi Garcia Blaze with the brand new Que Onda show, a radio show program that highlights Chicanos and Latinos and those who are willing to work with our community. And with me today is Hector Barajas Varela, an 82nd Airborne Army veteran who received an honorable discharge from the United States military, and unfortunately he was deported. And just a little bit of a side commentary on this issue. I believe that the United States government, the United States military, who might be willing to enlist and in some cases draft undocumented immigrants, I believe they have a responsibility to ensure that those who serve honorably in our military, they should ensure that they become documented American citizens. Immigrants who serve our nation's military have earned their right to become American citizens. After all, they're the ones who put their lives on the line and have raised their right arm to serve and protect our United States Constitution. Hector, welcome to the show. Tell us about your organization.
Good morning, and I just wanted to comment on what you just said, is that most people don't know that the draft, the draft by law, anybody who is here legally, and it's happened where they have also drafted undocumented people in World War I, World War II, Vietnam, and Korea, so this is nothing new. But most of the veterans that we're advocating for are men who were drafted in Vietnam, some undocumented, but for the most part, everybody had some kind of legal status, including myself. We had a green card, and the military is nowadays taking people that are undocumented, but that's through the MAVME program, and it's only for certain identifiers like linguistics, like in Afghanistan and those type of things. So about our organization, well, I'm the director and founder of the Deported Veteran Support House, and currently we have veterans deported or being deported to 30 different countries. We're working on a database, but the house initially, what it's for is to take them in and to give them resources so that when they're deported, they can get back on their feet and get back into their routine of here without their families, but at least having a job and having a place to stay. We have different people volunteering, from psychologists, art classes. We had meditation at one point, and we also do a lot of media outreach to raise awareness about what we're doing. We do actions. This weekend we had the Veterans for Peace convention, and they were able to bring some people across, and we had a legislative workshop on Monday. So we do a little bit of everything. Besides it just being a shelter, I call it the Operations Center for the deported veterans throughout the world, and even veterans that are being deported out of the United States sometimes, for the most part, actually reach out to us and ask us how they can help or how they can be helped. Sometimes we refer them to attorneys, to people that are doing documentaries, or to congressmen that are helping us out. So it varies on the situation. So you have veterans that are being deported in the detention centers in the United States that reach out to us for help, or sometimes to even assist us while they're going through their situation. And also veterans deported to 30 different countries, which makes it even more difficult, and we're really overwhelmed already, but we're trying to do the best with what we have, and we're in the process of becoming a nonprofit in Mexico so we can get local funding from the Mexican government and also from the United States government. But
good. Now, I wanted to just explain to my audience that recently I took a trip to Tijuana, and I visited your bunker, a place where you do house veterans who have been deported, and right now you're able to be a viable operation based on donations and the goodness of other people's giving to your cause. One of the things that really stirred a righteous anger within me is when you told me that people who have been drafted in our United States military and yet were deported are only able to return to our nation when they die.
yes.
And you also told me that there is no medical veteran facility near in any of the border towns, to include Tijuana, where some of the veterans go when they're deported. How are you getting medical attention? How are deported veterans getting medical attention?
So there's no facilities in Tijuana or any border towns. The only VAs outside of the United States that I know of are in the Philippines and Panama. So what happens is I recently applied for my service-connected pension, and they told me, yes, you're eligible. Here are your appointments. And I told them I cannot go to my appointments because I'm deported. So what happens is we're missing out on our appointments for our CMP exam, but we're also there's men that were already seeing the VA before they got deported, and one of the there's a trick, or I don't know, it's a trick. There's a catch into seeing a established foreign medical program. One is you have to be rated in order to be seen by this foreign medical program. Second, you have to be, I believe it's over 30%. And I could be wrong on that, but so what happens is most of us were seeing the VA through some we're seeing them to an extent, and when you're service connected, of course, then you can go be seen for just about anything. But if we were in the United States, we could walk into the VA and we could get certain treatment, like alcohol and rehabilitation. There's different things that the men could get without having to have been service connected. So that's the problem, is none of the men are getting any medical care. So what's happening? They're getting sicker. Some of them have things that are connected with the service, and when they die, they could be taken across the United States. The VA is going to pay for the plot of land, or they could be, or basically buried in a national cemetery, and they're going to be and a VA marker is also going to be given to them. So they're going to treat them just like any other American veteran. And one of the recent things that we've had also happen is when the men are pretty much on their deathbed, they're allowed to return back to the United States on a humanitarian visa, but only if you're terminal, they're going to allow you. And we've had men turned away as well. So it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be able to go across. So I think it's wrong to let these guys go back only when they're dying, or to be treated as Americans when they die. So
another thing, Hector, there are some legal arguments that the president cannot pardon any deported veterans. But here's the question that I have with you on that. The president of the United States is the commander-in-chief. And if the United States Armed Forces is able to, through various rules and policy, if they're able to enlist undocumented immigrants, then the commander-in-chief should have the ability, maybe not pardon per se, but to give a humanitarian parole, because in my view, these veterans need to be treated, and they ought to be. If anybody ought to be given humanitarian aid, it's veterans who served honorably in our nation's army. What do you think?
Yes, I think I think you're correct, and he can sign an executive order as well. They can put in legislation that and you said the legal argument. So one of the legal arguments is U.S. nationality. When we serve in the military, they give us a form of citizenship, and they're saying that is forfeited once we leave the military. We've been trying to establish that argument in the Supreme Court. So that's one of the things that we're hopefully going to introduce into legislation this year, and that's what we had the workshop for on Monday. So I think it's very important that the president does have the power to do an executive order and either granting us U.S. nationality or retroactive citizenship. I mean, there's various things that they can do if they really wanted to, or they can use have the VA establish clinics out here as well in the U.S. consulates. Or
it would make more of a financial, economic sense. I think that we would be on a slippery slope to have numerous VA clinics outside of the United States. Why not just bring in the veterans, allow veterans to come to San Diego or border towns if they choose to continue to live outside of our United States borders. I know that you do want to come back to the United States and be with your daughter.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
But it would not make any kind of fiscal sense to just create numerous VA clinics outside of our nation's border. I think it would make more economic sense to just allow the deported veterans to come in and receive medical aid.
Yes, and they can issue special passes if they wanted to, so we can even if they just wanted to do that, just so we can go across and go to the exams and those kind of things. So but that's what we're working towards, just finding the solutions. And I did want to also state or let people know that the reasons that the veterans are being deported, because I want to be very upfront in case they decide to help out, is most of the veterans are being deported depending on the situation. Is they committed some kind of crime. It could be anywhere from a $300 check to a drug possession. It varies. And some of that stuff we do believe that it's service connected, meaning the guy came back with PTSD, started drinking, and maybe got into a bar fight, or maybe started using a substance to deal with the PTSD, and then eventually became an addict and maybe stole something. So it varies from person to person, but we're asking for another chance for these men to go home at the very least. Not give them their citizenship, but make them U.S. nationals, and to give them their treatment. If we have died in combat as non-citizens or legal residents, we would have been given posthumous citizenship. Had all these men that had been drafted into Vietnam died in combat, their name would be on a wall, on a memorial wall, and they would be considered heroes. So if the U.S. government is willing to take us in and send us to war by drafting us, I think they owe us that loyalty to at least, U.S.
But
nationality.
that's the thing, Hector. Undocumented immigrants have died in combat.
Yes.
And they paid the final price. And I firmly believe that anybody who serves as a veteran, you know that I'm a veteran who served as a bomb dog handler in the United States Air Force. I'm very passionate about immigrants who serve in our nation's military. And they've earned American citizenship, and I believe it is the responsibility of the Department of Defense and our government to ensure that these young men and women earn their right to call themselves an American citizen, especially when they honorably serve.
Yes, and you mentioned something important is most people don't know that, again, that we could draft non-citizens or even undocumented people, but there are over 30,000 legal residents serve in our armed forces every year. So there's people that that are legally here and they serve in our armed forces. What happens is now they're a little bit more expeditious about the citizenship. But when I was in, it was a 3-year waiting period. One of the things that I always say is I was never counseled on citizenship. Every time if we were to deploy or if we were we were on standby because we were with the 82nd Airborne. Our SGLI, our will was done, but we were never counseled on citizenship. So it's a failure on the government, and then a failure on the soldier as well. Okay,
so after this break, we're going to take a quick break. After this break, I want to continue our conversation. And for the audience that's listening, we are with Hector Barajas Varela, an 82nd Airborne veteran who honorably served our United States Army. And we'll be back.
Need to get away for a while to rejuvenate? Then consider a vacation house in the beautiful East Valley of Mesa, Arizona, near a variety of water parks, rivers, and lakes, and other types of entertainment to wash the stress away. Just go to www.redmountainstay.com to get started on your vacation arrangements. Or call 480-436-9005 to reserve your stay. Also a great idea for Arizona residents wanting a vacay stay. Corporate housing is also available. Ask your representative for more details.
And we're back with Hector Barajas Varela. Hector is a veteran of the United States Army, 82nd Airborne, and he is a gentleman that was deported and is living in Tijuana currently and would like to come back into our nation. I want to just underscore that Hector served our nation's military honorably and received an honorable discharge. Hector, thank you for being on the show again, and I just want to now pull from you a little bit about your personal life, your daughter, for instance.
Well, basically, like we'll probably start in the beginning. I came to the United States when I was around 7 years old from Mexico. We eventually got our residency. I became a green card holder, what they called back then. And I grew up in Compton, California, decided to join the military, served for almost 6 years as a paratrooper with the 82nd Airborne. I volunteered one more time, we call him two-time chump. And I put my life on the line, jumping out of airplanes and pulling operations with the 82nd. Eventually, after the military, I was deported. And the reason I was deported, I did a prison sentence, 3 with half time for a discharge of a firearm, and I went to state prison. After that, I was put into deportation proceedings. And during the time that I was deported, it was considered an aggravated felony. And recently, in 2011, that same charge has been. There was a ruling by the Supreme Court that it's no longer deportable. So I am in the process of filing for citizenship. I currently have a life deportation, but hopefully with this new ruling by the Supreme Court, I can get my citizenship. So I have a 10-year-old daughter. My parents are all U.S. citizens. My sisters. I have a great family. My daughter's mother, who we're not together anymore, she's very supportive, and but she also has multiple sclerosis. So she's pretty much, she's pretty much going through the whole gauntlet without me. And one of the things that we talk about is that, we suffer a lot of the deportation, obviously, but we don't see the things that happen back home when the family's left behind. And now that, she's the single parent that has to do everything, so it's very important that we work to making sure that our families are taken care of. So that's my as far as my personal life, that's the reasons I was deported. I paid my debt to society. I'm not saying I'm a saint or anything like that. Haven't been to prison anymore or jail. I've had a lot of struggles, personal struggles, and I've been homeless out here in Tijuana, and I've gone through addiction and all those things, and that's one of the reasons I think that I started this place, because I've seen the difficulties and the things that the men go through, so I could understand, the guy that's going through the homeless or going through addictions and all those things. So it's very important that I think that we keep helping these guys out in any way we can. And I want to thank you for taking the opportunity to listen to us, because we consider ourselves Americans, and our families are Americans. And
Definitely. When was the last time you saw your daughter? What year was that?
The last time I saw my daughter, I saw her. It's been about a month and a half, 2 months. But I talk to her on Skype just about every day. Lately, I haven't, because I've been working on this event that we had this weekend. Her first day of school was yesterday, so I missed out on her first day of school and being there for her. And you can only do so much when you Skype with somebody, but at least they know that you're there, and you keep the communication open. So, we try to. I try to.
What's your daughter's name?
Her name is Liliana. I call her Chiquibu. So, very beautiful little girl. Yeah,
if you were to dedicate a song to her, what song would that be? Is there a song that you would sing to her as a lullaby, or is there a particular song by a musician that makes you think of her?
There's this song. I think it's called "Mind Wide Open," and I forget the name of the singer, but it just reminds me of her. She inspires me a lot, because she's the adult sometimes. There's been times when I've cried, and she tells me, "Don't cry, Daddy," or "Everything's gonna be okay," or she's very she's awesome. But it's just being separated really sucks. Being separated from your family, and that's the worst of it. There's a culture shock over here, because We've never lived over here. We don't know the language sometimes.
Mhm.
Mexico at least is close to us. We could, but imagine the guy gets deported to Poland or Jamaica and has never been there. There's also the pay is different. You make $60 a week.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of things that come with the deportation. It's like a second punishment. So, and in a sense, it's a double jeopardy. Nowadays, the courts have recognized that military service plays a role in the reasons that these men get in trouble. So now they have veterans courts. They're establishing them throughout the country. So they look at your military service now and say, okay, well, you served in the military or you went to combat. Okay, you know what? Well, instead of giving you prison time for that bar fight, we're going to give you anger management. Instead of sending you to prison for possession, we're going to give you drug treatment. So you don't get that charge that deports you eventually, or so you don't, because once you become a felon or once you go to prison, you get stigmatized by employers, by people. You have that, and it's easier for you to just any little thing sometimes to get you in trouble. So the courts are saying, you know what, the military service, PTSD, it's real, it's happening, and we're gonna try to make sure that our men don't get caught up in the system and that revolving door. So it's very important that's something that we talk about as well.
Where can my audience donate to help you continue your mission there at the bunker in Tijuana?
So we have a GoFundMe, and we also have MoneyGram and a PayPal. Our website is not up to date right now. It should be up by this weekend. I have some volunteers finally. So it's deportedveteransupporthouse.com, or they can find us on Facebook, Deported Veteran Support House, or they can contact you, and we can forward them the link and the PayPal for information so they can donate. But did you say it was deportedveteransupporthouse.com? Yes.
Okay.
And they can also, we're not just looking for the money is great because we need this place to run and we need, we need to buy things in the house. But we also want, volunteers, somebody that has a talent, running a website, or maybe they're a counselor. Those are the kinds of things we're looking for as well. And the most important thing is legislation. We need to get our men home, and also attorneys. We need attorneys to help fight some of these cases where the men are still being deported, or maybe work on making their criminal charge a misdemeanor so that we can readjust their status. So there's a lot of things a lot of needs. If somebody they have a talent, there's something they can offer to the house. It doesn't have to be specifically money, but one of our biggest problems is sometimes we're barely making it every month, but everything's welcome. Just please share our information, and thank you for having us on this forum right here.
I want to make a call to Chicano artists out there that are listening to this program, that if you have an artwork piece that you would like to contribute to deportedveteransupporthouse.com, please either get a hold of me and let me know if you're willing to contribute an art piece to this organization, and I'll make sure that the piece is sent to Hector Barajas Varela so that they could raise money. Your art piece would be sold to raise funds for this important cause.
Yes, we recently had a visit with you, but also Mark Lane came across in Torrey Step, and they're going to be working on a fundraiser because we don't have a vehicle, and in order for us to be more effective and to be able to pick up volunteers and people that come across from the States, we need a vehicle for emergencies and all kinds of things. So we have a GoFundMe where we have up to, I think, $750 so far. The target's $5,000, but they're going to be having a gala where they're going to try to donate some of these items. Or if you have an old vehicle, 1988 hoopty,
okay,
who cares? We'll take it. So it's very important that that people support the transportation event. But also, if somebody wants to donate a vehicle, that would be even better.
Right, and thank you for bringing up Mark Lane. Mark Lane did tell me another immigration advocate out of San Diego, that you were trying to raise funding for a vehicle. And so if there's anybody who's listening to this show, and if you have a van, please consider donating a van to Hector Barajas Varela, signing over the title to him. He lives in Tijuana so that he can continue the mission of helping other deported veterans who honorably served our country. Hector, really quick, there were some dog tags that were displayed near the entrance of the bunker. And can you tell me who that you know of, the deported veterans who died without medical aid? What are the names of those people?
So some of the names that we have up there are Jose Solorio, Juan Montemayor, Gonzalo Chaidez, Hector Manuel Barrios, Ramon Acedo, and there's other men that their names are not on there, like Manuel Castano, Derar Pay, Gino Garcia, Joe. These are just the men that we've come into contact with, Faust, not in Mexico. So, I mean, so imagine how many men are out there dying every day, and we have 22 suicides every day. Can you imagine being deported and having that extra stress on you? So it's very important that we don't just advocate for, our main goal is deported veterans because nobody's doing it. What we advocate for is for all veterans and their families, and just making the world a better place. We help out deported women here. We work with the community, so it's not about just the deported veterans. We want to make this world a better place for our children. That's we want to leave something behind for them, a better environment. So we try to do a little bit of everything, And I'm very thankful for the people that believe in us and continue to support, because that gives us a sense of hope. I believe in our country. I don't think there's any country better than the United States. I think we've had injustices, and that happens all over the world throughout human history. But it's up to us as a citizen or as a concerned person to try to make a change. And changes are great, but it's got to begin within myself. I've been clean and sober for almost 2 years, and I'm thankful to God for that. And I'm still alive here today because of people that believed in me, and I want to help other people and help my brothers get out of that rut, or help take them in so they don't have to live in the streets. And so I'm very thankful for that.
Well, thank you for appearing on the show. And just to wrap it up, for the listeners that are out there, please consider giving financial help to this operation to Hector Barajas Varela, and you can do so by going to deportedveteranssupporthouse.com. And if you are an artist and if you want to contribute a piece of artwork in an effort to raise money so that Hector can buy a van and continue with this mission, that would be helpful. And or if you have a van that you would like to contribute to Hector, please contact me or Hector Varela right away. Just to wrap this up, Hector, I gave you my word in Tijuana. I had to see your situation with my own eyes. I had to feel comfortable. I can honestly say that after meeting you and visiting the bunker, I feel comfortable. I feel good in my heart. I feel that this is the right thing to do, that to stand for immigrants who served in our military with an honorable discharge. They should be American citizens.
You've been listening to The Onda Show with your host, Dee Dee Blaze. This program is the property of Star Sound Music Group, Hollywood, California, and is available for syndication by emailing your request to affiliates@kondashow.com or call 213-283-STAR. Educational institutions, please call to see if your school qualifies for free licensing on your campus radio station. This program was produced by Dee Dee Garcia Blaze. Executive producer is Frank Miranda. Imaging by David Tyler. Thank you for listening to The Onda Show. Don't forget to pencil The Onda Show in your calendar. The program airs Thursday nights at 7 p.m. and then again on Sundays at 5 p.m. here on CRN Live.